So think of it like fourth line or fifth line of treatment. There's basically nothing left for these patients. They have, in 90% of the cases, 90, they had metastatic stage 4 disease that have failed all available treatments.
All right, welcome back inside our proactive newsroom. And joining me now is Dr. Paul Peter Tak. He is the CEO of Candel Therapeutics. And Paul Peter, great to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well. It's good to see you again. We have many meetings recently because we have a lot of positive results.
Absolutely, yes. And we're excited to talk about that. And this is all in relation to CAN 2409. So I know that you were in the phase 2A clinical trial. So let's talk about CAN 2409 and what this trial was going to do.
Yeah, so what we've shown here in a patient population of patients with non-small cell lung cancer who had failed multiple lines of chemotherapy and treatment with immune checkpoint inhibitors, in most cases Keytruda, who have a very poor prognosis. They have progressive disease, they have failed everything, that we can actually see doubling of the expected median overall survival in this population if we are able to give them 2 administrations of CAN 2409. So we've seen durable responses. We've also shown a so-called long tail of survival. That means that 37% of the patients were still alive 2 years after CAN 2409 treatment, which is much longer than you would expect. And we have several patients who lived even like after 3 or 4 years, imagine with progressive metastatic lung cancer.
Yeah. Paul Peter, let's talk about the patients in the study, because as you mentioned a bit earlier, I think it's a point to mention again, is the fact these patients are the sickest of the sick. These are the ones that have used a lot of treatments that aren't working. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. So think of it like fourth line or fifth line of treatment. There's basically nothing left for these patients. They have, in 90% of the cases, 90, they had metastatic stage 4 disease that have failed all available treatments. So they have a very poor prognosis. They will get docetaxel chemotherapy, which is the best standard of care, which is associated with a median overall survival of not more than 10.8 months. So that's the population we are focused on. And then actually, they also had very poor prognostic factors, like PD-L1 expression was very low. That's a biomarker that's used in clinical practice in a very large proportion of the patients. Most patients were previous or current smokers, another unfavorable factor. And then as I mentioned, metastatic disease, they failed medicines like Keytruda and multiple lines of chemotherapy.
Yeah. What should people take out of this type of data that you're showing here? Because obviously it reads very nicely and that it gives people, another chance at life, so to speak. So what should people take out of what you've been able to accomplish so far in the development of this?
Yeah, this is a phase 2A clinical trial where I believe we have shown data that nobody has seen before for any treatment in the pipeline of the industry. And if you look at our press release, the quote from Professor Charu Agarwal, who's a leading non-small cell lung cancer specialist at the University of Pennsylvania, she said literally these results are striking in light of what's available in standard of care and in the pipeline of the industry. So this gives us hope that we may have a potentially transformative treatment for patients who have run out of options. Of course, we will need to reproduce these findings in a large, potentially registrational clinical trial. So that's the next step. We are preparing with our key academic experts and the FDA a larger clinical trial, which would be a randomized clinical trial of CAN 2409 versus the best standard of care docetaxel chemotherapy.
Yeah. And how long does that take to put into action? When should people be seeing some more information about, when the start date would be and how long it's going to run?
Yeah, we've not announced that, so we're going pretty fast usually, as you've seen, with other programs. So we're working very hard. We've started to engage with the key experts. So we have already an idea what this study more or less is going to look like. We will pressure test that with the best of the best in academia, and of course, make sure that we are aligned with the FDA, but we've not announced the timelines when we expect to have a protocol.
And lastly, just speaking of the patients that you were dealing with, these numbers that you're talking about, in essence, saving someone's life potentially. That, you know, if this all is accurate and works the way that you want it to work, what does that mean for sort of treatment of sort of the last line of defense against cancer?
Yeah, we are seeing a whole new concept with the introduction of CAN-2409, which we have shown now in therapy-resistant, late-stage, end-stage non-small cell lung cancer, but we've seen it also in pancreatic cancer, another horrible disease. And we see exactly the same. Even in the patients who we cannot cure, nobody can cure them. We are able to extend the overall survival. These patients live longer with a reasonable quality of life because actually our treatment is generally very well tolerated. It leads to like flu-like symptoms that last typically less than 24 hours, comparable to, for example, COVID-19 vaccination. And that's it. It's only 2 administrations where we basically educate the patient's own immune system how to control the tumor and extend life.
Well, it is fascinating stuff, and we look forward to following the next stages of this as well. Dr. Tak, thank you so much. Great to see you again. And again, congratulations on this very interesting study.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, Dr. Paul Peter Tak. He is the CEO of Candel Therapeutics.